is far past time for the nations of the world to confront another reckless regime, one that speaks openly of mass murder, vowing death to America, destruction to Israel, and ruin for many leaders and nations in this room. The Iranian government masks a corrupt dictatorship behind the false guise of a democracy. It has turned a wealthy country with a rich history and culture into an economically depleted rogue state whose chief exports are violence, bloodshed, and chaos. The longest suffering victims of Iran's leaders are, in fact, its own people. Rather than use its resources to improve Iranian lives, its oil profits go to fund Hezbollah and other terrorists that kill innocent Muslims and attack their peaceful Arab and Israeli neighbors. This wealth, which rightly belongs to Iran's people, also goes to shore up Bashar al-Assad's dictatorship, fuel Yemen's civil war, and undermine peace throughout the entire Middle East. We cannot let a murderous regime continue these destabilizing activities while building dangerous missiles, and we cannot abide by an agreement if it provides cover for the eventual construction of a nuclear program. The Iran deal was one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. Frankly, that deal is an embarrassment to the United States, and I don't think you've heard the last of it, believe me. It is time for the entire world to join us in demanding that Iran's government end its pursuit of death and destruction. It is time for the regime to free all Americans and citizens of other nations that they have unjustly detained. And above all, Iran's government must stop supporting terrorists, begin serving its own people, and respect the sovereign rights of its neighbors. The entire world understands that the good people of Iran want change. And other than the vast military power of the United States, that Iran's people are what their leaders fear the most. This is what causes the regime to restrict internet access, tear down satellite dishes, shoot unarmed student protesters, and imprison political reformers. Oppressive regimes cannot endure forever, and the day will come when the people will face a choice. Will they continue down the path of poverty, bloodshed, and terror, or will the Iranian people return to the nation's proud roots as a center of civilization, culture, and wealth, where their people can be happy and prosperous once again? The Iranian regime's support for terror is in stark contrast to the recent commitments of many of its neighbors to fight terrorism and halt its financing. In Saudi Arabia early last year, I was greatly honored to address the leaders of more than 50 Arab and Muslim nations. We agreed that all responsible nations must work together to confront terrorists and the Islamic extremism that inspires them. We will stop radical Islamic terrorism because we cannot allow it to tear up our nation and indeed to tear up the entire world.
Good morning and happy Sunday, everybody. You are watching Eric Semken, and this is the Political Badass Podcast. What is a political badass? It's somebody that goes out and gets people to vote for freedom, vote for the American freedoms, God, family, and country. Those three words represent to me the values, virtues, and beliefs, the actual three tenets of the traditional American society. And it is under attack, that American society, by every angle, foreign and domestic. That's what's happening, folks. And I got involved in politics back when my daughter came home from high school one day. Says to me, Dad, they asked us in school on a survey. It happened to be an illegal survey, a rogue survey by a teacher that had no business giving that survey. And said, Dad, they asked me who flies an American flag at their house. And I said to her, Sarah, that's none of their business. You know that, right? She said, of course, Dad. But the class went on to teach how that's racist. And that is what put me on a path to find my task and my purpose. Why am I here? I'm raising children, really, so that they have children, so that the values, virtues, and beliefs that have been passed down through my family and yours for countless generations before us are enabled to have the freedom to endure. And those freedoms, more than any time in my lifetime, and I'm sure yours, regardless of age, are under question, they're under scrutiny. And what I have on my screen right now is an example of that. This is a letter written by someone that I admire greatly, Stephen K. Bannon, one of Trump's most trusted advisors. Used to work with Breitbart. He's an economist, worked for Goldman Sachs, understands the world view, the world order. And one of the things that happened to him, one of the many crazy lawfare that's been happening against Trump, against Republicans, conservatives across the board. They wanted him to actually give information about January 6th. And as we see, based on news, reliable, credible news, January 6th is a sham. You know, I was watching that day, and I watched those people walk through the velvet ropes taking selfies for the most part. Was there some bad actors there? Absolutely. Some of those bad actors, many of which the number is staggering. I didn't see the number. I know it's a staggering number of feds that were in that crowd, almost inciting violence. It was scary. And Steve Bannon said, no, I'm not coming to the January 6th trial by a sham committee because I have presidential and executive immunity, meaning that the things that he was consulting Trump upon, those were private conversations between the President of the United States and himself. And when he didn't show up for the subpoena, along with Dr. Peter K. Navarro, they put both of them in prison for 4 months. Stephen Bannon went away July 1st, and he gets out October 31st. They took out one of the head leaders of what we call the MAGA movement. And MAGA, no matter how badly they demonize that acronym, it stands for Make America Great Again. The very things that Donald Trump was speaking about that I just showed you on that video back in 2017, talking about Iran and their proxies and the fact that they're working on nuclear weapons that we as Americans are helping to fund by sending foreign aid there, and that aid is being used to make these weapons. It's being used to oppress a people, and it's being used to create chaos that we know these communists that are running the New World Order want. And so Stephen Bannon, for the first time this week, wrote an email that was read on air. And I'd like to start this broadcast by reading that to you. It's on my screen now. And Stephen Bannon, he really says to you that you need to find your task and your purpose. And his famous line that he gave at CPAC was, ask yourself, what is your task and what is your purpose? And if that answer is to save your country, then this country will be saved. He says it much better than I, and here's a little clip of it. So the letter goes on to say that recent shifts in the few reliable polls in the key districts and swing states show that hard-pressed Americans are decisively rejecting the phony politics of joy and the empty promises that define the Harris campaign. People are seeing through the word salad rhetoric, recognizing it for what it is, hollow. To date, the Harris campaign has offered no real solutions to the struggles Americans face. Inflation, rising crime, and weakening national security. These topics cannot be masked by the feel-good phrases, celebrity endorsement, or as many Oprah interviews as you want. Harris has peaked. The momentum is now on our side, and this is the time to capitalize on it. If the Make America Great Again movement focuses all of its efforts on a massive get out to vote ballot chasing campaign and effort in the crucial days and weeks until November 5th, we will win, and we will win big. The stakes have never been higher. This is the opportunity to take back control. We are not just fighting for a win. We are fighting for the future of America. A victory of this magnitude means sweeping control of the House, Senate, and the presidency. With this trifecta, we can destroy the policy that have harmed Americans and put the country back on track. The reality is that there is no significant group of undecided voters left regarding the candidates themselves. People know where they stand when it comes to President Trump and his opponents. What remains unclear for some is whether they will actually participate in the voting process. These are the individuals who will decide this election. With relentless effort and personal contact, they will break our way. It's our job to engage with them, ensure they understand what's at stake, and motivate them to cast their ballots. President Trump risks his life every day to save our country. Every day he faces a tremendous opposition and challenges, but he continues to fight for the American people. Through your work, show him that you have his back. Let's demonstrate our commitment to the cause by putting everything we have into these final weeks. Remember, victory is at hand. And Bannon is slated to be released from prison on October 29th, just 1 week before the election. Those are some serious words, my friends, and we are in seriously challenging times. If we do not win this presidency, if we do not win big in this election, we're going to be hurt like no one's ever been hurt before. They are coming for you, and they're coming for your family. And one of the most important things to me, as far as this fight that we're facing to endure freedom, is the public education system. And I talk about it every week on this podcast, and I hope you're not sick of hearing about it. If you are, oh well. You know, speaking of which, we're coming up on a week in Judaism, and I say that because we're talking about Iran, we're talking about Israel, and the freedom that Israel represents to the Jewish people. And one part of the high holidays, we call it in Judaism, is to express to friends and neighbors and family that if you've done anything throughout the previous year that hurt or offended somebody, to apologize for it. And I'm here to tell you that it may have been me that said or done something that may have offended some people. And as opposed to apologizing for it, I'm going to make a suggestion. I think that you should work on yourself, really, and become a little bit less sensitive to words. Because when you hear something you don't like to hear, it's usually an indicator of truth. You know, when people are being sold a bill of goods or being bullshitted, you know, you tend to feel good about those conversations, you know, joy, peace, all those things that the Harris campaign is promoting. But they're saying that just to get elected, and we all know it by now. I mean, if we don't know it, we need to be talking about it. We need to be talking about the freedoms, the God-given freedoms in these founding documents. You know, the antithesis, the people that hate freedom, they hate this document. They hate what it represents because it's from the Word of God that we are giving our rights. We were given our rights in America by God. And they don't want God. They want atheism. They do not want you to believe in a higher power than the state. And when you look back to Civics 101, most of us know that the Declaration of Independence, the preamble, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator, and they're given certain unalienable rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Keep in mind, life is number one. These radicals want abortions at full terms. They do. They say they don't, but we know they do. But before that paragraph, there's another paragraph, we don't talk about that much, which says, and when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for the people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We were talking about the separation of America from England at that point. Who are we talking about separating from now? That question will be answered at some time in the near future. And I hope that that answer provides us with solutions for the problems we face. But we're not going to have solutions the way things are going. Where are we going here, folks? You know, people say you should ask yourself, how are you doing now compared to 4 years ago when making your choice for voting for a president? And I would add to that that you need to also be able to take the trajectory that we're on and predict where that path is going to lead us and decide if the leaders that we are choosing through this election on November 5th, 2024, are they going to have the persistence, the tenacity, the moral turpitude, the capability, the intelligence to be able to lead us on a path where freedom will endure? Because I got to tell you, I love the life that I live and that I've been able to create for my family under the free enterprise system of capitalism, where you can go out and you can work hard, you can learn, you can create opportunities for yourself that are already here inherently. And the powers that be, and when I say the powers that be, I know who those powers are. These are a globalist set of leaders that want global democracy. And when the right says that we're here to defend democracy, then the left says that the right is here and they need to protect us from the demise of democracy under the right's leadership. They are lying to you, okay? They're lying to you. I'm speaking to people in the middle. As Stephen K. Bannon said, you know, that many voting groups have already made the decisions. And I've been saying that for weeks and not months. But what is compelling people to vote for Harris is something that I don't fully understand, but I know it exists. Of course, not everyone's going to agree. But what are they basing their information on? A lot of that comes down to the education system in our country. And just this week on Wednesday, I went to another school board meeting at Voorhees Township. And there was a couple things that I noticed at this meeting. That is, number one, when they went to give the results of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, they talked a lot about the achievement gaps. And the achievement gaps basically break down the children into subgroups. Those subgroups being white, black, Asian, Latino, non-English learners. They break down those subgroups and they look at the number and they say, we've done a great job this year closing the achievement gap. The problem I saw with those numbers is that there's certain subgroups whose scores went down. In particular, in this one, it happened to be the white students. They went down, and then the Hispanic and Latin community, their scores went up, and so did African Americans, which is great. I think that we need to raise scores. But there's absolutely no regard, no commentary, no thought, no conversation about what made the white kids' scores go down. And it's, to me, that's racist, is it not? I mean, they're teaching anti-racism, Ibrahim Kimbi, and all these white fragility programs that they're instilling in our children. And basically, there's no way for us to raise the scores of everybody because that will not promote equity in education. And equity in education is a word that's totally disguised. You know, it sounds like equality, you know, giving equal access to programs. That's how equity is really defined. But what they really mean is equal outcomes, right? So how would I define equity? I define it as taking the worst possible outcome to any given situation. And let's say you're a leader of any sort, school board member, you're a superintendent, an administrator, even a teacher. And I hate to say that because, you know, I come from a long line of teachers and educators in my family, and those fields have become misguided hotbeds for raising children, not educating them, not teaching them, but raising them. That's what they want. Social services in public schools are becoming more and more prevalent. They are hiring a massive number of social workers to work in the schools as employees of the school district. And what that means is that when they see something that they don't like, something that is alarming to them, who knows what that is? They don't have it written. You can't find it in the policies. But they can refer you to a social service. I mean, look at Michigan. Michigan this week just enacted a law, a bill they approved that allows for children basically to turn in their parents. That's right. They're encouraging children to call social services, tell somebody at school if the parent is not storing their guns properly, as one simple example. I believe in gun ownership. I believe in the Second Amendment. Joe Biden says it's not absolute because you couldn't own a cannon when that law was written. I mean, that's an obvious given, okay? We're not looking to have military weapons. We're looking to have rights to keep and bear arms. That is written, and that is absolute in the Second Amendment. And it doesn't talk about states coming and checking in with your kids and see what you're doing with your guns in your house. As a matter of fact, anytime that the government comes in and touches your family like that, that is a telltale sign of communism. And that's what we're dealing with. These are commies. They are. You can call them Marxists. Marxism is usually aligned with economic theory, okay, not fact and truth theories, things changing the world and making the world a better place. Even in Judaism, we used to call that Tikkun Olam. That's been hijacked, just like BLM and Pride was hijacked by communists, by Marxists. And they're not looking to equalize. They're looking to take from some and give to others, just like the redistribution of wealth. And these things are coming from the globe, from the world, global standards of education, which have been enacted by the United Nations. And the United Nations, I can promise you, going back to that speech that Trump made, it's the United Nations against America and freedom. These globalists, they want full control of your mind and of your body and of your children. There are 50 million students attending public schools. What are they learning? They are learning how to rise up against solidarity, anti-racism, radical LGBTQIA+, sex, sexuality, and gender theories. That's what they're being taught in school. Their grades, they suck. You think your kid's smart? I don't think so. They're smart based on the standards, but they've lowered the standards of academics in America. That's right, they've lowered them. They don't want scores. They don't want standardized testing because it's racism, okay? All these things. They don't want scores because they can't properly educate your child. They have lost their path in education through SEL, social emotional learning. What is it? I had a good friend of mine, Nick Stouffer. She called me last week. We talk all the time. We started a coalition a few years back called the New Jersey Project. And part of this election is school board members being elected, okay? And if you live in New Jersey, you usually have 9 school board members. 3 are elected each year. So every 3 years, you're able to turn that over, the school board, Board of Education. And they need to be turned over because I was at the last school board meeting. No parents were there, okay? Maybe 2 in the audience, 2 parents out of the 3,000 students. Nobody cares. But what's more interesting to me is that there was also no teachers there. There might have been one getting an award or something. But the fact that there's no teachers there was alarming. And here I come to find out the reason that there are no teachers there is they did it on purpose. Usually there's a bunch of teachers there talking good or bad or commenting on different things happening in the district, promoting, activities. None. There were none because none of the teachers want to show up because they are in solidarity against the leadership of this school district. They're not happy. The last time that they had a superintendent that wasn't happy, okay, and they weren't happy with him, they illegally sent what they call the climate survey out to the teachers that they can answer anonymously. And they used that information of those anonymous responses, some of which were total bullshit and made up. by the way, because Oprah requested them and I read them. I read that whole survey, and they fired this poor guy because he wanted people to come back to school after COVID, no masks, come back to normal. The problem is that goes directly against the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset. You've heard me talk about it before. It's a true, actual thing. They did not have enough time during COVID to totally reset us. So that's what we're seeing now. They're still trying to reset us. So we started this New Jersey project to create awareness. And I want you to go to the NewJerseyProject.org and take a look at the list that she's compiled of parents' rights-based school board candidates. Okay, I don't know why there's been a line drawn between pro-education and pro-parents. It should be one and the same, because a parent, a parent or guardian has the sole right to direct the upbringing of their child. That is in the Constitution. And those rights are being taken, just like freedom of speech has been taken, under misinformation and disinformation initiatives. We don't know everything that's going on. And if you do want to find out about it, you really got to dig. And that's what I do all day, all week long. So I can provide you with valuable information, truth, and facts. Something that is like holy water to Dracula, okay, on the other side. SEL, social emotional learning. It was invented by a guy named Dr. James Comer. James Comer was the head of child psychiatry at Yale University in 1968. It just so happens that in 1968, there was a whole lot of other stuff going on, like the Civil Rights Movement, Kumbaya, Summer of Love, 69 coming up. And this guy, James Comer, he's a doctorate of child psychiatry. And he figured out the Comer method of learning, which is basically to dumb down the academics in the school programs and make everyone feel good, because they understand that a child that feels good emotionally learns better. The problem with it is they never re-inject the learning part of it. And they talk about feelings, thoughts, and ideologies, and kumbaya sitting around the campfire. School climate was the word they came up with. What's the climate of the school as far as violence, as far as interactions between the students and the faculty, how to basically keep all that information away from the parents and insulate the children from the misdirection of the parental upbringing. And back in 1963, when we were looking at the communist goals, where Congress convened a panel to discuss what the goals of communism were, many of which those goals had to do with education and education of our children. And they said that they wanted to basically form a line between parents and the education system. They've done a very good job. Going back to Dr. James Comer, this was enacted in two public high schools in Connecticut. Really bad situation, a lot of race issues, a whole lot of not learning going on. Their scores, no one was proficient in reading, math, English, science, social studies. There was a absentee problem, which they claim there still is today. And I would have to say that an absentee problem has to be with the parents of that child, and they're not making sure they get to school. I mean, there are some parents and families that definitely need some social services, but mine don't. Yours don't necessarily. And if they do, it's being created at school. They're there for almost 8 hours a day. And they've changed the curriculum drastically. The pillars of SEL have nothing to do with scores or academic education. They have to do with social justice. That's the word that they use, social justice. And social justice used to be a good thing, right? Let's get everybody equalized here, but it's not now. I mean, it's going in the wrong direction. Again, they've opened the door to radical ideologies, from anti-racism to sex and gender to anti-family, pro-abortion. You know, you have Planned Parenthood has a huge role in our education system, under the guise of promoting, you know, safe sex and things of that nature, and combating the AIDS epidemic that happened decades past. They use that, and ultimately their goal is to depopulate. That's the globalist agenda. And so all these forces are being combined and compelled to work and operate within our school districts. The learning standards, they're global learning standards, so that a kid can be in any country and end up in any country and be able to plug in and assimilate to the education system. That's not where we need the assimilation. Let's start with the rule of law and what governs our country. Deuteronomy 6.7, and thou shalt teach them diligently to thy children. Them is the word of God. And these people, they are looking to take God out of the education system 50 years ago. Separation of church and state. What the separation of church and state really meant was to not allow a government to state sponsor religion that you have to abide to. But they're doing that with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're celebrating diversity every day based on what people have that are different about each other, and that's causing violence. It's causing a divide. We need to be talking about the commonalities, the common things that we all have in common, the common bands, that we talked about in the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. Really, at the end of the day, there's only one solution for right now, if you're able, and that's to pull your kids from the public school system. And if you don't, you're going to have problems. I mean, my kids were just old enough when COVID struck to skip this stuff. They were barely old enough. They were 16, 17 years old. And now they're in college and they're getting hit with a whole bunch of new DEI type initiatives, but they're old enough to understand the values, virtues, and beliefs that were instilled by their parents are still the most relevant things to be learning about. So I want you to take a look at a website. It's called samsorbo.com, samsorbo.com, samsorbo.com. It's a great set of information and tools to use when you're considering pulling your kids from the public education system. I understand it may be an overwhelming type of idea to do it, and I know it would overwhelm me slightly, but I would do it in a second if my kids were any younger. And if my kids were anywhere from pre-K to 8th grade, there is no doubt whatsoever my kids will not be stepping into a public school. I mean, I just went to a movie last night to see Reagan. It is a great film, a little slow running, a little bit long, but excellent reminder of what the fight was against then and now. And that's communism. It is communism. And I hate to keep saying it. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Okay? There are no such thing as conspiracies, but there's also no such thing as coincidences. I mean, look what's going on. They're trying to take Trump out. They're trying to murder him. Okay? Why? Because they want control over us. And they can't control us in mass. They've got to separate us into small groups, subgroups, just like I'm talking about in the education system. It's dangerous to be in a school, and it's scary. So I went to this movie, and I see that there's an armed private security guard at the movie theater. Probably the first time I've ever seen or noticed one in a movie theater, and I've been to a couple of movies lately. I did not notice it at the other theater I went to. But it looked like he had some sort of tactical weapon on him, which I'm okay with as long as he knows how to use it, but the danger's there. Any place where people are congregating is now a danger in America. And it's why we have to elect Donald Trump to unify this country again and make things better financially. And we need to deport these illegals that are pouring over the borders. They're not safe people. They're not going to be good neighbors. They have to abide by the rule of law, and that starts with applying for as an immigrant. And they're not doing that. They're skipping that process, so nothing that happens there is going to be good from it. Nothing. So we need to be aware, and you need to understand that your child is enduring some very scary things at these schools. I mean, ask your kid what a lockdown drill is like. I mean, as a child, I never would have dreamed that I would have to even consider these things as threats. In California, they used to go under the desks, for a drill in case there's an earthquake. That's an act of God. These are acts of people that we are running from, that we're afraid from, that we're living in fear about. So why are they still here? Why are we still letting them in? They're just letting them in. They're in your kids' school. They're in your kids' classrooms at every school across the country. And if they're not, you're lucky, but it's coming. That's why this election matters more than any election. It's not the most consequential. It will be the last election lifetime if we don't elect Republicans, because these Democrats, they've lost their path. And I'm not sitting here saying go be mad at your neighbor and tell them that they're a bunch of radical lunatics. They may be, but your discourse needs to be with the people that are elected and the people that will listen to you, listen to reason. Why are you voting Democrat? Are you not paying attention? Where are you getting your news from? Give them alternatives. You can tell them go to ericsimkin.com. That's one place I can tell you where you can get good, valuable information and news sources. And no, this is not self-promotion. I don't care about monetization and how many views and what's going on with this podcast or my website. I care about getting the information out, because to me, that's what a political badass does. They don't just talk about it, they do it. You go out and you get people engaged. Civic engagement is key to our success. And we need to win this election together. United we stand, divided we fall. These things are cliches for a reason. You could think of a million different cliches to describe what's going on. And what's going on in education is pathetic, okay? I went to the school board meeting and it just reminded me of a clip that I made a few weeks ago from one of my shows. I'm going to share it with you now. It's called Where Are the Dads? That's what I want to know. We got Moms for Liberty out there. And yes, there are some great fathers involved in our organization, some of which I know very well, some of whom. And I will tell you, it's very disappointing to be the only dad. And guess what? I don't have a kid in the school. I'm going so I know what's going on in the school to tell you. What are you going to do about it, Dad? Wake up. That's what you need to do. Take a look. I go to a lot of school board meetings. Where are you, fathers? What are you going to do about it? You going to sit there and let your family get touched by a government? Are you out of your minds? You really need to start paying attention to what's going on, what's being taught to your kid. I mean, if a stranger on the street walked up to your kid and started talking about masturbation, blowjobs, and anal sex, what would you do? Because that's what the teachers are doing. They have the right to teach about all this stuff at whatever age they want. They decide what is age appropriate or not. You don't get to decide. You better get involved. What's the first thing you do? Go to a school board meeting. Okay. All I want to hear about from my friends and people that watch this podcast is how many people went to a school board meeting this week. And if you don't, you're failing yourself. And even worse, you're failing your children. And they're taking the parent out of the equation because they don't need your permission. They don't need to tell you what's going on with your child because they know what's best for your child. They know better than you. That's what they believe. So under social emotional learning, it is the most expensive educational process you could possibly imagine. I've mentioned before that both my parents were proud public educators in New Jersey, very proud. They understand that their job was to provide the best possible education that those local towns that they worked for could afford to provide to children. And at that time, when my mother retired, I guess it was back in about 2006, the average cost to educate a child in a very, very well-run school district was about $5,000 per pupil. Today, when I look at the budget in Voorhees Township, it's $22,000. That's right. It went from $5,000 to $22,000. SEL is one of the most expensive ways to educate a child. We have been working on educational reform in the public school system since its inception. And over the last 50 years, we've tried it a dozen times. No student left behind. That was the last one. Total abject failure. Today, it's called Every Student Succeeds Act. Total abject failure. Why do they keep having to change it? Why stick around and find out why they need to keep changing it? The fact that they need to change it is your indicator that you need to disconnect from it. And that is to homeschool. And that is why I want you to go take a look at all the different sources, all the information, all the different outlets for socializing with your children if you're homeschooling them at samsorbo.com. SAMSORBO.com. That's what you need to be doing for your family. Because it used to be that you just went out and worked harder and lived in a better school district and paid higher taxes and your kids would get a better, proper education. The problem is that's no longer the case. With education and equity in education, they want to dumb down your kid as dumb as any other school district in the state or in the nation or even on the planet Earth. So in equity, in any environment where there's equity being preached these days, you have to understand you got the scale going, right? You put some weight on this one, it brings this one up. Okay, but it doesn't bring them both up, does it? No, it just equalizes equality. But that should be your opportunity, not your outcome. And when you talk about education equity, they're not talking about access to programs for all students. I agree that every student in America should have access to similar programs. But why live where you live? Why do you have to work harder to make more money to pay the local taxes that pay for your local school districts if you're not getting anything any better than anywhere else? Just think about it. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to cut some things from your personal budget to be able to afford to educate your child properly. Because if you don't, your child's going to school scared. They're going to school not fitting in. You can't fit into this type of regime's education system if you're anything but like a normal person. You just can't make yourself fit in. You cannot fit a square peg into a round hole. There is another cliche for you that holds true today, just like the day the first person that said it meant it. That's what you're looking at. You need to take decisive action to protect your family and protect the most valuable thing that you could possibly have on this earth or anywhere else, and that's your child. Whole child education is what it's called, with global standards of education that are dictated by the United Nations, UNESCO, United Nations Education Science Foundation. Okay, United Nations. It's a bad thing. It is a very bad, scary, dangerous thing. And you need to listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. And if you need to confirm it, just Google the United Nations Education Science. Google what their standards are. The standards are lower. That's how equity works. You can't rise everybody up. You can't do it. It's not possible. They don't have the funds. They don't have the educational resources. So they can only bring up the subgroups. Well, if you're already we're a little bit ahead, don't think that that's going to continue if you allow your child to continue to participate in a dangerous public education system that's designed against them. It's not made to make them do better. It's made so that the other kids that are just getting here, that need a leg up, they're going to do better, but your kid's going to do worse. They do these small group education classes where they take the subgroups and spend more time with them. That just means one thing. Your kid is having less time spent with them. And what do they talk about with their kids? Well, under diversity, they have to inject and infuse radical LGBTQIA plus sex and sexuality and gender theory into every aspect of your child's education. Math, reading, science, social studies, which really should be history. Okay, they talk about this stuff with your kids in every class all day long. So when we say stop indoctrinating our children, you have to understand, people, that when you hear pushback on that word, we're not indoctrinating, that is a bold-faced lie, because how do you educate children? Through indoctrination, repetition. You ever heard of repetition? That's how you teach a kid. Well, that's what they're teaching their kid, except for the things they're repeating are about radical sex, sexuality, and gender. Abort your baby full term. Don't worry about it. If it's a mistake, you can just undo it by getting an abortion. Why has Planned Parenthood got anything to do with education? Why are they teaching these kids that if you think you're a boy but you're really were born a girl, that we can give you some puberty blockers and change that for you? It's not the American way to be whatever you want to be based on your sex and gender. That's to be a provider for your family, animal instincts that kick in to provide the best for your children. That's what we're talking about. Okay, here's my theory on gender theory. Okay, this is the Eric Simkin Academy 101 gender theory class right here. It's from another podcast. Take a listen.
Let me explain something to you, folks. Okay, there's two sexes, male and female. That's it. There's no such thing as gender. Gender is a socially constructed thing, that how you identify. And there's unlimited personality. So if you identify as something different than your biological sex, clearly it's part of your personality, because it's internal. It's part of your mind. It's part of your soul, but it's not how your body was created. And that's okay. If you feel different, I know plenty of tomboys. I've known plenty of effeminate men But they didn't say that if I take these pills, there's no such thing as a puberty blocker. They're hormones. So if you're a boy, they're giving you girl hormones. If you're a girl, they're giving you boy hormones and then doing surgeries on you. These are children. They're making decisions on their own. And they're taking the parent out of the equation because they don't need your permission. They don't need to tell you what's going on with your child because they know what's best for your child. They know better than you. That's what they believe.
They do. They believe that they know better than parents. And that brings me back to your right as a parent to direct the sole direction of your child's upbringing is to you, the parent, and they are taking that away. Okay, look at if you live in New Jersey, policy 5756 shouldn't exist. They just need to change one word. It says that if your child leaves your house, you call him Jimmy, and Jimmy gets to school and decides that he wants to be called Jane and she, her as identifying pronouns, that they can do so without letting you know as a parent. That's right. Okay, what else are they going to do to your kid that they don't tell you about? And then they encourage your kid to keep secrets. What about all their friends that used to come over? Now they're not coming over. Maybe they don't want to be involved in the big lie to your kids, to you as a parent. They don't want to be involved. So now your kid's got no friends coming over. That sucks for your kid. Should never be allowed to happen. Something happened to my kid when they were under the influence or the whatever you want to call it, gender affirming care. There shouldn't be a thing called gender affirming care. Gender is part of your personality. So why would you affirm something that totally goes against the natural order of things with DNA? I mean, that's how you're born. Unbelievable to me, but that's what we're seeing. That's what we're witnessing. And that's why you need to seriously consider this year, today, pulling your kids from the public education system. And really, you need to start thinking about how you're going to work outside of a system that, God forbid, will exist if President Trump is not elected November 5th. Because we're going to have a system of chaos, of communism, Marxism, and all sorts of schisms that are not going to be good for you. They're not going to be good for me, and they're not going to be good for our families or our futures. Okay? Klaus Schwab, you'll owe nothing and be happy. They want to take away property. That's Commie 101. If you don't have property, there's nothing to argue with over your neighbors. You got nothing to steal. No one's going to come to your house and take anything. That's right, because you won't own it. You'll be a renter and the state will be your landlord. And that's how it's going right now. And that's what needs to stop. So what do you do about it? Here's what I do about it. When I get pissed off, or even when I don't, I make phone calls to other people, make sure they vote for Trump. Turning Point Action has the best app that I've seen. You can go there and download it today. Turning Point Action. Download it. Go ahead. Get it done. Download Bill Blaster. Bill Blaster is an app that has every single one of your federal and state legislators on speed dial, basically. So when something's happening and you know you need to make a call and have your voice heard, you know who to call and where. It's got the number in there, you make the call. But as far as getting out the vote, okay, if there's any possibility that you're going to have some sort of reason or excuse that you can't vote on November 5th, you need to order a mail-in ballot right now. Go order the mail-in ballot. What's the worst that can happen when you get your mail-in and you decide to go vote in person? The only thing that could happen is they make you do a provisional ballot. It's still going to be counted. I confirmed with our county here in Camden County, with the election commissioners, and that's what will happen. You don't want to do mail-in ballot, you got to vote early. We have to bank votes, because what happens is Republicans, we all want to vote the last day, right on election day. But then you look at the polls. Oh, this one's up in New Jersey. I'm not going to vote. Screw that. Go vote early for 2 weeks before the election. 7 days a week for like 10 hours a day. There's 8 people sitting at 8 different voting booths waiting for you to come and vote. It didn't get utilized enough last year, but I went and did it. It was the best way to vote possible. No lines, no confusion, very casual. I went there when I was on my way down Route 73 and I voted. No excuses, no harm, no foul. Get it done. Go to Turning Point Action, okay, and pull up their app. You can pull up the 15 closest people to your geographic location, and you make a call or a text. It's got a pre-canned text, and it's got a script you can read, or you can say whatever you want. Get 10 people to vote. Become a force multiplier. That's what Stephen K. Bannon taught me. You have to be a force multiplier. My way of force multiplying is doing this podcast. I've met hundreds of people through this podcast. With all the feedback I get, it's unbelievable. I need you to go get 10 people. If we all go get 10 people, we will beat the steal. Okay, this election has to be too big to rig. I'm not saying that every Democrat cheats, but a lot of the operatives do. They have ways to affect the results and outcomes in elections in very key strategic locations. I don't know which locations they are. It's above my pay grade. All I know is we need more votes than they got. And how it's going to happen is by you talking to your friends and neighbors, no matter what subgroup you're in. I don't care. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Asian, Latino, Jewish, Islamic, whatever you are. It doesn't matter. We all live on this same island and breathe the same air. It's called America. Okay, America, home of the brave, land of the free. It's the best place on earth, and that's why the rest of the country on earth don't want it to exist in its existing capacity. These are what's called existential threats. Okay, we are not the threat to democracy. Trump or any of us that are MAGA, make America great again. There's nothing wrong with those words. There's nothing wrong with those terms. They actually are great terms. And if you go and watch Ronald Reagan's movie that was just out with Dennis Quaid, did a great job. Make America great again is a very simple and enduring concept. And if we don't do it, it's not just that America's not going to be great. It's going to cease to exist in the capacity that you know it. And I've got a great relationship with America. I love it here. Okay, my family came here legally generations ago. Okay, I think I'm 4th generation born here now. My kids are 5th generation, and I plan on passing down the values and virtues and beliefs that have came from countless generations before me to my children, my future grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, all the way down the lane. And if we don't stand together as a country, we will not have that opportunity. It starts with pulling your kids out of the public education system until it's corrected. And I don't know that it will be corrected, okay? But until then, you need to find a way to pull your kids. Cut off your cable bill if you have to, if you can't afford it. Stop paying for certain things. Stop giving your money to people that hate you. That's what you could do. Save your money. Live within your means. Don't go and buy the fancy car. Downgrade something. Get rid of a lease payment and buy something with your money that you work hard for. And then educate your child. There's nothing better that you could do than talk to your child. And that's all that education is. You're going to have an open communication and you're going to have great children. All right. What I do for a living, I'm in a lot of houses. I do home services, heating, air conditioning, plumbing, all that stuff. Okay. I'm in about 50 or 60 houses a week down here in South Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. Mass majority of people are disgusted and upset about what's going on in America, whether they voted Democrat in the past or not. They realize it. I'm overwhelming majority. The one family I was at the other day, this little kid couldn't be more than 8, 9 years old, was showing me around the house, couldn't be more social with me as another human entered his house. It was a brand new house for them, and I'm complimenting him. This is a great house. You're going to have a great life here. This must be so exciting. Do you have to change schools? No, Eric, I didn't have to change school. I'm homeschooled. And he was proud to tell me. And I said, oh, really? That's phenomenal. I wish I homeschooled my children. Do you like being homeschooled? He said, I love it. I love it. And this kid was way more socially capable than most kids that in houses I go into where the kids are going to public schools. I got to tell you, most kids are sitting in their bed with the covers on and watching a phone or some sort of device or listening to some sort of influence. It's really sad, actually, because the parents will ask them, can you please get up and do this? And they don't want to. They want to sit there in their bed and watch whatever they're watching. But this kid was socially ready to go. And it was amazing. And I was so happy to talk to this kid. And we talked for a couple minutes, and he's learning everything that he needs to learn. It's not hard to do, folks. There's the interweb, okay? All the content that your school's teaching is all available. You think that there's somebody at your school district writing the curriculum anymore? They don't even write curriculum. They buy it. And guess what? They can change it at a moment's notice. They can change one word and change the total meaning of whatever it is they're teaching your kid. It's not a good thing. And some of the results that we're seeing of these kids being educated in public schools are clear as a bell to me. I mean, you watch CNN and interviewed 10 kids, and you'll see the approach the kids have to politics. You know, you ask a kid whose parents are probably Republicans, you know, what do you think about, what's the first word that comes to mind when you say Kamala Harris? He says liar. But you ask a Democrat kids what's the first thing they think about when they hear Trump, and it's like they compare him to Hitler right away. There's no way that's possible without a broken education system. And the parents obviously went to that same broken education system if they allowed children to think that way. You don't have to control everything your kid thinks, but you have to be an influence. You should be the influencer, not Taylor Swift who works for NATO. You're letting your kids be influenced by all the wrong things. And you have to pay attention to what I'm telling you. I know the outcome. I've been through it myself. I saw what happened when I wasn't as involved as a divorced father, when I was living outside the state and only saw my kids twice a month. It was very difficult. I'm talking to your parents. I really mean this, and I'm emotional about it. I wish it didn't happen. I wish I was an influence for my kids every single day, but I wasn't. And when I wasn't, things changed. It wasn't because of us. It was because of what was going on at school. My kids had a miserable high school experience. During COVID and post-COVID, they saw how divisive things were. Kids are no longer nice to each other. I mean, in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, 2 weeks ago, we had a beautiful young woman, I think 17 years old, high school student. She took her own life. It was so sad. Why would the kid take their own life? Because they're being bullied. They're being cyber bullied. You need to disconnect. You need to disconnect your children from something that's sick. You wouldn't send your kids to a hospital and sit there with a bunch of sick people, would you? But that's what you're doing when you send them to school every day. If you can't find the means to get your kids out of the school, find some other things to sort of deprogram them. You know, there's all kinds of organizations out there. I mean, I get these things. I don't have kids in school anymore, but I get them delivered to my house. The Kids Guide to Presidential Elections. The Kid's Guide to the American Dream that's being taken from them. Even Kamala Harris said in an interview this week, which is pathetic, that it appears that the American dream is being harder and harder, and it's escaping more and more people. That's because you're letting it. That's right. Wake up. You're letting the American dream escape you and your children, and it's got to stop. Let's look at what these 10 kids had to say when they were asked.
What's the first word that pops into your head when you hear the name Kamala Harris?
Liar.
What's the first word that pops into your head when you hear Donald Trump?
Pure evil.
Donald Trump, he's given his life and his heart.
She even shook hands with Mr. Trump to greet him before the start of the debate, which is pretty kind of when you're going against your opponent.
How much do you like Donald Trump using that scale?
Donald Trump probably hates me for doing this, so,
You really don't like Donald Trump?
I mean, come on, he went to, like, jail. I mean,
Donald Trump, he did bad things, and he didn't care about his country. He's like Hitler, who convinced everybody.
He only wanted to be president so that he can just control everybody.
Which one of these two candidates do you think is more likely to do bad things?
Convicted felon against a liar. Oh, who do I pick? I'm gonna say Trump because he's a convicted felon.
Should he be president again still?
Yeah, we can say, for example, JFK. He cheated on his wife, but people still loved him. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, both slave owners. So being a slave owner is really bad. It's a really bad thing. But they still had 2 terms. So I think even though Trump has done bad stuff, he still deserves to run for president.
So you can see that kids that are in more conservative households don't really contain that same sort of vitriol, the same sort of aggressive stance on the candidates or their neighbors. And like I said, with political discourse, you don't have it with your neighbors. You don't call up your neighbor and call them out for every little thing that they did that you disagree with about. Okay, you go to the elected officials and people in authority. So to summarize things, you got to think about the cultural standards of our society, which are God, family, and country. And if you want those to persevere and persist and continue with your children and future grandchildren, you need to vote Republican. That's all there is to it. The Democrats are lost. If you ask anybody that was a Democrat or Republican now, they didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left them. It's been happening for decades. God, family, and country, the three tenets of what we believe are the natural order of things in America. And that's what I believe in. I'm going to leave you with a total stark contrast on economics between President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, who, by the way, could close the border right now, who could fix a lot of these things as Vice President. But she doesn't. She can go do them now, but she's not. Friends, family, and neighbors, I wish you all the best. I hope that anything I've said can touch you in some sort of way to make a different approach to things, to get out the vote, to do whatever it takes to get Donald Trump elected this November 5th. Otherwise, like I said, it could be the last election of our lifetime. Thank you all for spending your time with me. God bless you. God bless your family. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
As we gather today, we have an economic disaster on our hands. We have an economy in crisis, a failing nation, a nation in serious decline under the radical policies of my former opponent, Joe Biden, and my new opponent, Kamala Harris. 1.3 million workers have become unemployed in the past 12 months. The typical American family has lost over $28,000 due to rampant and record-setting inflation. Credit card debt has reached the highest in history, with more than 1 in 3 Americans reporting they have maxed out their credit cards. They've maxed out. Families now need to earn an estimated $110,000 a year to afford a typical home, meaning 65% of households are locked out of buying just an ordinary house. Gasoline prices, grocery prices, electricity prices, mortgage rates, and virtually everything else are up 30 to 100% since I left office. 8.4 million Americans are now working second jobs, the highest in more than 30 years. The real wages of African American workers are down by over 6%, a short period of time. The real incomes from Hispanic men are down 6.6%, or $3,600 per year. And on top of that, African Americans and Hispanic American jobs are under massive threat from the invasion taking place at our border. They're taking the jobs of Hispanic Americans, African Americans, and nobody talks about it, but I won't let it happen. Yet after presiding over the border, the worst in history for any country, there's never been a border like this. 21 million people, we project. This total economic catastrophe, the border czar, Kamala Harris, has now been slotted in by the Democrats to be reelected. She wants 4 more years to enforce a radical left agenda that poses a fundamental threat to the prosperity of every American family and America itself. And we're talking about America itself. She wants to defund the police, have totally open borders, ban fracking in Pennsylvania and everywhere else, take away your private health insurance, and perhaps most pertinent to the very brilliant people in this room, raise your business and corporate taxes, and unbelievably, she will seek a tax on unrealized capital gains. Most people don't even know what that means. What does it mean? She has been after all of this for years, and as everyone knows, she is a Marxist who destroyed almost single-handedly San Francisco, and when she was the AG, California itself, not the same place. People are leaving. They're fleeing like they are in New York. She'll seek out and she will try and get those things if she's elected, and she may very well succeed in getting them. She recently said her values have not changed, and these have really been her values for her entire career. Her values haven't changed. That's what she wants. So she told the truth. We're not going to let this happen. Communism is the past, freedom is the future, and it is time to send Comrade Kamala Harris back home to California, where crime is rampant and fleeing is the #1 occupation. I'm here today to lay out my plan to rescue our country from this nightmare and to bring back to its citizens the American dream, bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. 8 years ago, I came before you as a candidate for president and shared my vision to end the stagnation and return to rapid growth. That's what we did. As president, I am very proud to say that we accomplished something that nobody thought that was even possible. Before the pandemic, real median household income rose by $7,684. And even after the pandemic, annual incomes were up $6,400. The average American household saw a $197,000 increase in real net worth in 48 months. For the bottom 50% of households, average wealth more than doubled, increasing by 121%. Lowest income people benefited the most. After 12 years of decline, we added nearly 7 million new homeowners. Never happened before. And in 3 years, we created 7 million new jobs, 260% more than projected when I took office. When I took office, they said you couldn't hit those projections, and we were 260% higher than what we said we could do. From the day I won to the day I left, the S&P 500 increased by 80%, and we did it all with virtually no inflation. We had virtually no inflation. Think of that. Who could believe that? I delivered the largest tax cuts and reform in American history by far, slashing rates for working families and cutting the business tax from the highest in the world. We had the highest in the world, 35%, and actually, when you add local and state numbers that were getting close to 50, but much, much higher, nobody's ever seen. We brought it all the way down to 21%, which everybody said was impossible to do. And I heard it from everyone. They said, you'll never be able to do that. And I got it down to 21%. I cut a record number of job-killing regulations. In 4 years, we cut more regulation than any president in the history of our country, by far. I'm proud to be the only president in modern history to achieve a net regulatory reduction during my term, and it was a substantial reduction, and for every regulation we added, we cut more than 5.5 regulations. We unleashed American energy, and within 3 years, we had increased domestic oil production by 47%, and we were just getting started. The price of gasoline was $1.87 a gallon. Doesn't that sound good right now? We negotiated and renegotiated more than 50 trade agreements with other countries that were taking advantage of us, as they all do, to protect the American worker and to open foreign markets, and we did a great job. I ended NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made in the history of our country, and replaced it with the USMCA, perhaps the best trade deal ever made in history. That's Mexico and Canada. I stood up to China like no one else before me. No one came even close. And I saved the U.S. auto industry from obliteration with a 27.5% tariff on all Chinese cars that remains in place to this day. They want to take it off, but they can't, because number one, it's too much money, and number two, we would be invaded by Chinese cars on top of the other invasions that are taking place. Without it, our auto industry would be dead. And now I am going further. We will bring our automaking industry to the record levels of 37 years ago.